No one spoke. Every pair of eyes followed my hand as I reached for the pen. This time, I wasn't signing away my home. I was deciding the future of my family. David quietly placed the final document in front of me. "This is not a transfer of property," he said. "It is your final instruction as trustee. You may follow the trust exactly as Eleanor wrote it, or, within the limits she allowed, you may show mercy." I looked at the first page, the words blurred for a moment, not because I couldn't read them, but because I was thinking about the young boy Ethan used to be. The little boy who insisted on carrying my toolbox because he wanted to be just like Dad. The little girl Laura who would fall asleep on my shoulder every Sunday afternoon after church. Those children still existed somewhere inside the adults sitting across from me. The question was, could they ever find their way back? I slowly signed my name, William James Carter, then I looked up. "I've made my decision," David nodded. "Would you like me to read it?" "No, I'll do it." I folded my hands on the table. "The trust will remain in place. The attempted sale of my home is permanently canceled." Susan smiled with relief. "My husband will be grateful to hear that." "I'm sorry for everything you've been dragged into," I said. She shook her head. "You don't owe us an apology. You protected us from buying a home that never should have been sold." I thanked her. Then I turned back to my children. "Ethan, you violated my trust. You lied to me. You tried to take away the home your mother and I spent a lifetime building." He lowered his head. "I know. I have no excuse." "You're right, you don't." I paused before continuing. "The trust says you lose your inheritance. I will honor that decision." A single tear rolled down Ethan's face. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded. "I understand." Then I faced Laura. "You followed your brother, yes, but today, you accepted responsibility. You apologized, and you told the truth." She wiped away her tears. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust." "I hope you do." I smiled gently. "So your inheritance will not be given to you. It will be placed in a trust. You won't receive it because you're my daughter. You'll receive it only if your actions continue to prove your mother's words." Laura broke down completely. She wrapped her arms around me. For the first time since Eleanor died, I felt like I still had a daughter. David quietly closed the folder. "Then there is one final matter." I nodded. "Yes, the foundation." Several months earlier, Eleanor and I had planned to create a scholarship fund for young people who wanted to learn skilled trades but couldn't afford training. After she became ill, we never finished the paperwork. I looked at David. "Let's finish it." He smiled. "I already have." He handed me another document. Across the top it read, "The Eleanor Carter Legacy Foundation." Its purpose was simple: to help young men and women build honest careers. Carpenters, electricians, nurses, mechanics, teachers, people willing to work hard, just as Eleanor and I always had. "The majority of my estate," I said, "will go to this foundation, not because my children deserved less, but because Eleanor deserved to have her dream live on." Months later, the first scholarship ceremony took place in the workshop where my company had started nearly 50 years earlier. The old machines had been restored. Fresh timber filled the air with its familiar scent. Photographs of Eleanor decorated the entrance hall. Dozens of young apprentices stood proudly with their families. Laura volunteered at the event. She greeted every student personally. She never asked for recognition. She simply worked, quietly, consistently, trying every day to become someone her mother would have admired. Ethan wasn't there. David later told me he had moved to another state. He had written me several letters. The first few were filled with excuses. Then came one that simply said, "Dad, I finally understand that losing the inheritance wasn't my greatest punishment. Losing your trust was." I didn't reply immediately. Some wounds need time. Forgiveness is a gift. Trust is something earned one choice at a time. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after everything happened, I returned to the house Eleanor and I had built together. The porch swing still creaked softly in the breeze. The oak tree still stood proudly in the front yard. Children from the neighborhood laughed as they rode their bicycles along the pavement. Life had moved forward. I sat on the swing wearing Eleanor's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Margaret arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled. "I think Eleanor would approve." I looked towards the house. "I hope so." Margaret glanced at the children playing across the street. "What do you think she would say?" I smiled for the first time in a long while. "I think she'd remind me that houses don't make families. People do." The afternoon sun settled gently across the porch, the same porch where Eleanor and I had dreamed about growing old together. I realized something then. My children thought they were fighting over who owned a house. They were wrong. The house had never been the greatest inheritance. The greatest inheritance was the values Eleanor left behind: kindness, integrity, responsibility, love. Those were the only things that could never be bought, never be stolen, and never be sold. Because in the end, the people who truly owned everything were the ones who never stopped choosing family over fortune. The room fell silent. David looked at me. "William, would you like her to come in?" I nodded. Yes. A few seconds later the door opened. A woman in her early 50s stepped inside. She looked uncomfortable, as though she had walked into a family argument she never wanted to witness. She carried a small wooden box wrapped carefully in a cream-colored cloth. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. "My name is Susan Mitchell. My husband and I were supposed to buy your house." Her eyes met mine. I had no idea any of this was happening. I gave a gentle nod. "I believe you." Susan looked visibly relieved. "The moment your lawyer contacted us, we stopped everything. My husband and I agreed the sale should never continue until the truth came out." David smiled politely. "They've been extremely cooperative." Susan placed the wooden box on the table. "When we were walking through the house with the movers, one of the kitchen cabinets wouldn't close properly. The foreman removed the back panel. We thought it was just old wood." She paused. "But there was a hidden compartment." Everyone in the room leaned forward. "I thought whatever was inside belonged to you." She slowly unfolded the cloth. The box was old handmade walnut. I recognized it instantly. "I made that." My voice barely escaped my lips. "It was Eleanor's keepsake box." Susan smiled softly. "I guessed it had sentimental value. I never opened it. I thought it would be wrong." She gently slid it towards me. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, everything was exactly as Eleanor had left it. A faded photograph from our honeymoon, a tiny pair of knitted baby socks, the hospital bracelet Ethan wore when he was born, Laura's first school ribbon, pressed autumn leaves from a family picnic, 43 years of ordinary moments, each one priceless. Laura burst into tears. "I remember those." "So do I whispered. At the very bottom of the box rested another envelope, unlike the first one. This one simply read, "Asterisk for our children." David looked surprised. "I've never seen this. Eleanor never mentioned it." I turned the envelope over. The seal had never been broken. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Laura looked at me. "Dad, I don't think I have the right to ask this, but would you read it?" I looked towards Ethan. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. Then I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Eleanor's handwriting was as elegant as ever. I began reading aloud. "My dear Ethan and Laura, if you're reading this, it means something has gone terribly wrong. Not because of money. Money was never the most valuable thing in this family." My voice caught. I paused for a moment before continuing. "Your father and I worked hard so you would never have to grow up fearing poverty. But I hope we also taught you that wealth without kindness is simply another form of loneliness." Laura quietly covered her face. Susan stood silently near the door, tears filling her own eyes. I continued. "One day this house will belong to someone else. That isn't what matters." I looked around the room. The words seemed written for this exact moment. "What matters is whether the people inside it still call each other family." I swallowed hard, then read the final paragraph. "If you ever find yourselves choosing between money and your father, choose your father." The room became completely still. No one moved. No one even breathed. Laura broke the silence first. She walked slowly towards me. Then, without saying a word, she knelt beside my chair. "I'm so sorry, Dad." I was weak. I kept telling myself Ethan knew what was best. But I knew you never wanted to leave that house. Tears streamed down her face. "I should have listened to you." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "I've waited a long time to hear those words." Across the room, Ethan remained standing. His face showed no anger now, only exhaustion. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly. "No," I replied honestly. "Forgiveness isn't something we deserve. It's something we're given." He finally looked at me. "But I can't undo what I did." "No, you can't." Silence settled over the room once again. Then David stood. "There is only one matter left." He looked directly at me. "The trust gives you complete authority. You may enforce every clause. You may remove every beneficiary. You may distribute your estate however you choose. No one in this room can challenge your decision." Every eye turned towards me. I looked at Eleanor's letter one last time, then at my children, then at the little walnut box filled with 43 years of memories. I realized something. The greatest thing Eleanor had left behind wasn't the house, it wasn't the trust, it wasn't even the money. It was one final opportunity for our family to decide who we wanted to become. I took a slow breath. I've made my decision. Before anyone could speak, David reached into his briefcase. He removed one final document. He studied it for a moment, then looked at me with a gentle smile. "William, I think Eleanor would be very proud of what you're about to do." The room waited in complete silence. As I reached for the pen, what did they hear? Ethan's voice was barely audible. For the first time since walking into the nursing home, he looked like a man who knew the truth had finally caught up with him. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. "William, I think you should hear it yourself." He placed his phone on the table and connected it to a small portable speaker from his briefcase. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Deb pressed play. At first, only ordinary conversation. A car door closing. Footsteps across gravel. Then a man's cheerful voice. "Mr. Carter, we're excited to move forward," Ethan answered confidently. "So are we." A second voice joined in. I'm just glad your father agreed. There was a brief pause then. Ethan laughed, not loudly, just enough to make my stomach turn. You don't need to worry about my father. He won't be living there again. The buyer hesitated. I thought he was recovering. He is. But by the time he's finished, he'll already be settled somewhere else. Another pause. What if he changes his mind? He won't. Are you sure? Then came the sentence that emptied the room of every remaining excuse. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late. The recording ended. No one spoke. I looked at Ethan. He couldn't even raise his eyes. Laura stared at her brother as though she were seeing him for the first time. You said that? He rubbed both hands across his face. I wasn't thinking. David calmly switched off the speaker. No, you simply never expected anyone else to hear it. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Finally, Laura whispered, did you really believe Dad would never come home? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he asked David a question. What happens now? David folded his hands. That depends. On what? On whether this was the only deception. He reached into his briefcase again. I had lost count of how many folders he had brought. Each one seemed to reveal another piece of a puzzle I never knew existed. This, he said, placing a blue folder on the table, contains the correspondence between your father's bank and my office. I frowned. My bank? Yes. 3 weeks ago, someone requested information about every account held in your father's name. Laura looked confused. I didn't know anything about that. David nodded. I believe you. Then he turned to Ethan. But someone certainly did. Ethan swallowed. I only wanted to know what Dad had. No. David's voice remained calm. You wanted to know what you could access. He opened the folder. There were requests concerning savings, investment accounts, retirement funds, certificates of deposit, and he paused. The family trust. Ethan looked genuinely surprised. The trust? I didn't know there was one. I believe that. David nodded. Because William never told you. Neither did Eleanor. They wanted you to build your own life, not wait for theirs to end. I looked down at my wedding ring. Eleanor used to say exactly that. If our children only work for an inheritance, we've failed as parents. I never imagined those words would return to me like this. David closed the blue folder. I've now established 3 things. He raised one finger, an unauthorized property sale. A second finger, an attempt to obtain legal authority through misleading documents. A third finger, and clear evidence that William was deliberately excluded from decisions affecting his own property. Laura began crying quietly. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have stopped this. I know. I kept telling myself Ethan knew what he was doing. She covered her face. I didn't want to believe we'd crossed a line. I gently reached across the table. She hesitated, then took my hand. It was the first honest gesture I'd seen from either of my children in days. Ethan remained motionless. His voice was flat. So, I lose everything. David looked directly at him. I didn't say that. What I said is that your father's trust contains consequences. But the final decision has never belonged to me. It belongs to one person. Slowly, every eye in the room turned towards me. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. This wasn't the future Eleanor and I had dreamed of. We imagined grandchildren running through the garden Sunday dinners, holiday laughter, not lawyers' evidence recordings, and broken trust. Finally, I looked at David. What happens if I decide to forgive them? David answered without hesitation. Then the law allows mercy. And if I don't, the trust will be enforced exactly as Eleanor intended. Before I could respond, there was another knock at the door. The receptionist stepped inside once more. Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry, but there's another visitor. David frowned slightly. We're not expecting anyone. I know. She looked down at the visitor's card, then back at us. It's the woman who bought Mr. Carter's house. And she says she has something that belongs to Eleanor Carter. I couldn't take my eyes off the engraving. If love is ever tested, choose character over inheritance. My fingers traced each letter inside Eleanor's wedding ring. She had carried those words in silence for years, and somehow, she had known they might one day matter more than anything else she left behind. Laura quietly wiped away a tear. I've never seen that ring before. You weren't supposed to, David replied gently. Eleanor asked me to keep it safe. She believed there might come a day when William would need a reminder of what truly mattered. Ethan folded his arms. This has nothing to do with the house. David looked at him. It has everything to do with the house. He carefully turned another page inside the trust. This family trust was never designed simply to distribute property. It was designed to protect your parents. Ethan gave a dismissive laugh. So what? A trust can't stop us from helping our father. No, David agreed, but it can stop someone from abusing him. The room fell silent. David adjusted his glasses and began reading aloud. No beneficiary shall obtain any financial benefit if he or she intentionally deceives, isolates, coerces, or exerts improper influence over either William Carter or Eleanor Carter for the purpose of acquiring family assets. He paused, then continued. Any proven violation shall immediately suspend that beneficiary's inheritance rights pending the trustee's final determination. Laura's face turned pale. What does that mean? It means, David answered calmly, that inheritance is not automatic, it must be deserved. Ethan leaned forward. You keep saying proven. Exactly. So prove it. His confidence surprised me. For a brief moment, I wondered whether I had misunderstood everything. David remained perfectly composed. I intend to. He opened another folder. This is not a courtroom, but facts still matter. He removed the first document, a copy of the listing agreement. The second, email correspondence with the estate agency. The third, instructions given to the moving company. The fourth, telephone records. The stack continued to grow. Each page landed softly on the table. Each page felt heavier than the last. Laura whispered, "Where did all of this come from?" "People leave records," David replied. "They simply forget that records tell stories." He picked up the listing agreement. It states that the sellers were acting with William Carter's full knowledge and consent. He looked directly at Ethan. "Did your father give that consent?" "No." "Then the statement was false." Ethan shifted in his chair. "We expected to get his signature, but you didn't have it." "No." David placed the paper aside. He opened the next file. This email was sent to the estate agent 2 days before William entered the nursing home. I frowned. 2 days before? David nodded. The property was already being prepared for sale. My heart sank. That meant the decision hadn't been made after my accident. It had been made before it. Before I ever slipped on those back steps, before anyone spoke about rehabilitation, before anyone claimed to be worried about my health. I looked at Ethan. "When did you decide to do this?" He stared at the table. Finally he answered. "It wasn't one moment. It happened gradually." "What happened gradually?" "You kept refusing to downsize. You wouldn't sell the business. You wouldn't move. You wouldn't listen. So you decided not to listen to me." His jaw tightened. "We thought we were doing what was best." David interrupted quietly. "Perhaps. But the law is not concerned with what you thought. It is concerned with what you did." He opened another envelope. Inside were printed messages exchanged between Ethan and the prospective buyers. One sentence was highlighted. Asterisk. "My father won't be returning to live there." Asterisk. The room became painfully quiet. I read the sentence twice, then a third time, not because I couldn't understand it, because I didn't want to believe my own son had written it. Laura covered her mouth. "Ethan, I didn't mean it like that. You sent it." I was trying to reassure the buyers by telling them I'd never come home. He couldn't answer. For the first time that afternoon, I didn't feel angry. I felt old, not because of my age, because I realized my children had been making plans for a future that no longer included me. David closed the folder. "I'm still waiting for one final piece." "What piece?" I asked. "The evidence that explains why everything suddenly moved so quickly." As if on cue, his mobile phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. A slow smile appeared. "It seems we've found it." He looked up at all of us. "The buyers have agreed to cooperate." Laura frowned. "Why would they do that?" David slid his phone into his pocket. "Because they only discovered this morning that they had secretly recorded their entire meeting with Ethan." The color drained from Ethan's face for the second time that day. He didn't deny it. He simply whispered, "What did they hear?" Ethan stared at the photograph. For the first time that day, he looked frightened. Not nervous, not defensive, frightened. David laid the phone on the table without saying a word. The room fell silent. I picked it up with trembling hands. There was Ethan, standing in front of my house, smiling, his hand firmly gripping the buyers. Behind them, a moving crew carried my dining table towards a truck, the same table Eleanor and I had built together over 30 years earlier. I looked up slowly. "When was this taken?" David answered. "Yesterday afternoon." I turned to Ethan. "You told me you were at work." He swallowed. You lied." It wasn't what it looked like. I couldn't help but laugh, not because anything was funny, because I had reached that strange place where the truth hurt too much for tears. "So tell me, what does it look like?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say. David finally spoke. "William, I think it's time." He unlocked his briefcase and removed the old leather folder I had seen earlier. It looked familiar, very familiar. The edges were worn, the leather had faded with age. A tiny scratch ran across one corner. I remembered making that scratch myself while carrying it out of my truck years ago. "You've kept this all these years?" David smiled faintly. "I promised Eleanor I would." Just hearing my wife's name filled the room with memories. Eleanor had always planned for tomorrow, not because she expected the worst, because she wanted to protect the people she loved. She kept emergency savings, important documents, even handwritten birthday cards for our future grandchildren. She believed love wasn't only shown in words. It was shown in preparation. David gently opened the folder. Inside were documents I hadn't seen in years. Our wills, business records, property agreements, letters. Then, he carefully removed a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, were 6 simple words. Asterisk to be opened only if necessary. My heart almost stopped. I recognized every curve of those letters. She had written them herself. When did she write this? I asked quietly. About 11 years ago, David replied. It was the same day we reviewed your estate plan. I searched my memory. That afternoon came back slowly. We had spent nearly 3 hours in David's office. I remembered becoming impatient. Do we really need all of this paperwork? I had asked. Eleanor had smiled. One day you'll thank me. At the time, I thought she was worrying too much. Now, I wished I had listened more carefully. David looked at me. This letter is still sealed. I've never read it. You asked me never to open it unless certain conditions were met. What conditions? He pointed to another page clipped behind the envelope. It contained Eleanor's instructions. She had listed them one by one. If either of us became permanently incapacitated, if ownership of the family home was challenged, if any heir attempted to obtain property through deception, if either parent was isolated or pressured into signing legal documents, only then the letter could be opened. A chill ran through my body. She had imagined this years before it happened, almost as though she had seen something I never did. Ethan leaned forward. This is ridiculous. Mom couldn't have known any of this. David remained calm. She didn't predict the future. She prepared for possibilities. Laura suddenly entered the room. She had rushed over after Ethan called her earlier. Her face looked pale. I came as soon as I could. She glanced around the room, then saw the photograph, then the folder, then the envelope. What is all this? Ethan stood quickly. Nothing. We're leaving. David's voice stopped him. No, I think both of you should stay. Laura looked at me. Dad, I know this looks bad. Looks bad, I repeated softly. My furniture is being packed. My home has a sold sign. I've been asked to sign away my rights. And you think this only looks bad? She lowered her eyes. Tears began forming. I never wanted it to happen like this. Those words caught my attention, not because of what she said, because of what she didn't say. She never said, "It isn't true." She never denied it. She only regretted how it happened. David quietly slid another document across the table. This is the family trust Eleanor insisted on creating. I frowned. I thought we only updated our wills. You updated your wills, but Eleanor requested something else, a protective family trust. I honestly don't remember. She asked me not to explain every detail that day. You became overwhelmed after discussing her medical diagnosis. I closed my eyes. That was the year Eleanor learned about her heart condition. No wonder my memories were blurred. My attention had been entirely on her, not on legal paperwork. David opened the trust document. It contained several standard provisions. He turned another page, and one clause your wife wrote herself. Even Laura looked confused. Mom wrote it? Personally, in her own words. David rested his finger on the paragraph but didn't read it aloud. Not yet. Instead, he looked at me. William, before I reveal this clause, there's one more thing you deserve to know. What is it? He reached into the folder one final time. This time he removed a small velvet pouch. Inside was Eleanor's wedding ring. I stared at it in disbelief. I buried her with a different ring, David said quietly. At her request, she asked me to keep the original. For you. My hands trembled as I held the ring. It was warm from the sunlight streaming through the window. Inside the band, I noticed an engraving I had never seen before. It wasn't our wedding date. It was a sentence Eleanor had never shown me. It read, "If love is ever tested, choose character over inheritance." The receptionist looked nervously between David and me. "It's your son. He says he only needs 5 minutes. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned towards me. "William, you have a choice. You can see him, or I can ask him to leave." I took a slow breath. Just 20 minutes earlier, I had been certain my children were simply making difficult decisions on my behalf. Now I knew they had listed my home for sale without my permission. There was only one question left. Would Ethan tell me the truth? "I'll see him," I said quietly. David nodded once. "But you won't sign anything, I promise." David slipped the old trust folder back into his briefcase. Before opening the door, he leaned closer. "If he places any document in front of you, don't even touch the pen." "I understand." A moment later, Ethan walked into the room carrying a slim black leather folder. He smiled, but it wasn't the smile I remembered from his childhood. It was practice-controlled, almost rehearsed. "There you are." He stepped forward and hugged me briefly. His embrace felt unusually quick, like someone greeting a business client rather than a parent. "I've been calling you," I said. "I know. I've just been so busy." "Busy with what?" He laughed lightly. "You know how life is. Work meets paperwork." He sat opposite me, carefully placing the folder on the table. His eyes landed on David. "I didn't realize you'd be here." David smiled polite. "I'm William's legal counsel. I've always been William's legal counsel." Ethan's smile faded for only a second, then it returned. "Of course, I just didn't think legal advice would be necessary." David folded his hands. "Neither did I." The room became uncomfortably quiet. Ethan cleared his throat. "Dad, I've got a few forms. They're nothing important, just routine paperwork. I looked at the folder. What kind of paperwork? Oh, medical authorizations, insurance updates. A couple of property maintenance forms. Nothing complicated. David didn't move, didn't interrupt, didn't accuse him of lying. He simply watched. I slowly reached towards the folder. Ethan immediately slid a pen across the table. This one writes really smoothly. His voice sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. Then I remembered David's words. Don't even touch the pen. Instead, I folded my hands together. I'd like to read everything first. Ethan blinked. Dad, you don't need to. It's all standard. I still want to read it. It'll only take a second if you just sign here. He opened the folder. Most pages were ordinary administrative documents. Then I noticed one sheet with several colored tabs. The heading immediately caught my attention. Special power of attorney. I looked up. What is this? Oh, that's just in case we need to handle things while you're recovering. What things? The house, the bank, utilities. Nothing unusual. I read the first paragraph. The language was dense, legal, deliberately complicated. Then one sentence stopped me cold. Asterisk, the appointed representative shall have full authority to transfer, sell, assign, or otherwise dispose of any real property. I looked directly at Ethan. This gives you the right to sell my house. He smiled nervously. Only if necessary. I thought you said these were maintenance forms. They basically are. No, they're not. His shoulders stiffened. Dad, you're making this much bigger than it is. David finally spoke. His tone remained calm. Mr. Carter, would you mind showing me the document? Ethan hesitated. It's private. David raised an eyebrow. Your father is my client. If he wishes me to review it, you cannot object. Reluctantly, Ethan slid the papers across the table. David adjusted his glasses and began reading. He didn't rush. He read every page, every clause, every attachment. The silence became unbearable. Finally, he closed the folder, then looked directly at Ethan. You've made an interesting decision. What do you mean? This document gives you authority far beyond temporary medical assistance. It's just a precaution. No, it isn't. David tapped one paragraph with his finger. It specifically authorizes the transfer and sale of Mr. Carter's residence. Ethan's face hardened. That's only if he can't manage his affairs. David looked at him steadily. And who decided he couldn't? The doctors. Really? Then perhaps you'd like to show me the medical declaration declaring Mr. Carter legally incapacitated. Silence. Ethan didn't answer because he couldn't. David already knew. There wasn't one. I stared at my son. You told people I couldn't make my own decisions? He avoided my eyes. We were only trying to help. Help? You listed my house. You packed my belongings. You stopped answering my calls. His voice became defensive. Dad, you don't understand. No, I finally do. For the first time since entering the room, the mask slipped. Frustration flashed across Ethan's face. We've been trying to protect this family. Protect it from what? From losing everything. I frowned. Losing what? The business loans, the taxes, the maintenance costs. You don't know how expensive everything has become. I stared at him in disbelief. The company has no outstanding loans. His expression froze. David quietly reached into his briefcase. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. He removed a thin file marked with the company's financial statements. I reviewed Carter Woodworks' accounts yesterday. He placed the report on the table. The business is profitable. No overdue taxes. No emergency debt. And no financial crisis. He looked Ethan straight in the eyes. So perhaps, you should explain the real reason you wanted your father's signature. Before Ethan could answer, David's mobile phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed immediately. He stood up. William, I believe we've just found the evidence we've been looking for. What evidence? David slowly turned the phone towards me. On the screen was a newly arrived email from Margaret. Attached were several photographs. The first showed movers carrying furniture out of my house. The second showed a large *Soldex sign, but it was the third photograph that made every color drain from Ethan's face. Someone had captured him, standing beside the buyers, shaking hands over my front lawn. Mr. Carter, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says his name is David Reynolds. For a moment, I simply stared at the nurse. The name felt strangely reassuring. David Reynolds had been my family's lawyer for more than 3 decades. He wasn't just an attorney. He had been there the day Eleanor and I signed the papers for our first house. He helped us create our wills after Ethan was born. He stood quietly beside me at Eleanor's funeral. If David had come here in person, something was terribly wrong. I'll meet him, I said. The nurse led me to a small private meeting room near the reception desk. David was already standing when I walked in. He looked exactly as I remembered, perfectly pressed navy suit, silver hair, calm eyes. A leather briefcase rested beside his chair. He offered his hand. It's good to see you, William. I wish it were under better circumstances. I shook his hand. Margaret called. I know. You spoke to her? He nodded. She contacted me this morning. I sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked the question that had been consuming my thoughts. Did my children sell my house? David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. He placed it carefully on the table between us. I need you to listen to everything before you react. My heart pounded. David, just tell me. He folded his hands. They've certainly tried. The room fell silent. Tried? Yes. They've listed the property. They've accepted an offer. They've even arranged for the buyers to take possession. I closed my eyes. So it's gone? No. His answer came so quickly that I looked up in surprise. No. The sale cannot legally be completed. I stared at him. I don't understand. David slid a document across the table. It was a copy of my property's title records. Look at the registered owner. I adjusted my glasses. The words were unmistakable. William James Carter. No other names appeared. Not Ethan, not Laura. Only mine. But they told me they'd been handling everything. They've been handling paperwork. They've been talking to estate agents. They've been making promises. But they do not own your house. I frowned. Then how were they able to put it up for sale? David sighed. They convinced the estate agency they were acting on your behalf while you were recovering. They presented themselves as your authorized representatives. Were they authorized? No. I never gave them permission. I know. Did I sign something in hospital? David looked directly into my eyes. William, that's exactly why I sent you that note. Do not sign anything. A chill ran through me. You thought they might ask me? I knew they would. He reached into the folder again. This is a copy of the paperwork the buyers were expecting. Several pages carried blank signature lines. My signature was missing. Without it, nothing could happen. They needed me. Yes, they still do. I leaned back slowly. For the first time since entering the nursing home, I felt something that wasn't fear. Hope, small, fragile, but real. They haven't taken my home. Not yet. David nodded, and I intend to make sure they never do. I looked at him carefully. You sound very confident. Because I know something your children don't. What? Instead of answering, he removed another folder. This one was much older. The edges of the paper had yellowed with age. He laid it gently on the table. Do you remember coming to my office with Eleanor 12 years ago? I searched my memory. 12 years. We updated our wills. Yes, and David smiled faintly. You did much more than that. I don't remember. Eleanor insisted. I felt my chest tighten at the mention of her name. She said something to me that afternoon I'll never forget. David paused, then repeated Eleanor's words exactly. If love ever disappears from this family, I don't want money to replace it. My throat tightened. I remembered the conversation now. Eleanor had become worried after seeing another family torn apart by inheritance. She had spent weeks talking about it, but I had always believed our children were different. David gently pushed the old folder closer to me. She made one request. And you agreed. What request? That if anyone ever tried to manipulate, isolate, or pressure either of you for financial gain, he rested his hand on the folder. Everything would change. I stared at him. What do you mean? Before he could answer, there was a knock on the meeting room door. The receptionist stepped inside, looking uneasy. Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry to interrupt. David stood. What is it? There's someone else here. Who? She hesitated. It's your son, Ethan. He says he's here to collect his father's signature. William, I think you need to hear something about your house. Margaret's voice didn't sound frightened. It sounded careful, as though she was choosing every word before speaking it. I gripped the phone tighter. What happened? There was a brief silence. I drove past your street this morning, and I saw 3 moving trucks. My stomach tightened. Moving trucks? Yes. They were parked in your driveway. I forced out a nervous laugh. That can't be right. My children are probably cleaning the place while I'm away. I thought so too, Margaret replied softly. But then I saw something else. What? She hesitated. There was a real estate sign. I stared through the nursing home's lounge window. The lake outside was perfectly still. A family of ducks drifted across the water. Everything looked peaceful. Yet my entire world suddenly felt unsteady. No, I whispered. There must be some mistake. I hope there is. But, William Sign said. She stopped herself. What did it say? It said, sold. The word echoed inside my mind. Sold. No, that wasn't possible. No one could sell my house, not without me. Are you sure? I walked right up to the sign. I even took a picture. I didn't know whether I should call you, but I couldn't stay quiet. I closed my eyes. Eleanor and I had signed every document together. She always insisted we read every page twice. Never sign anything you don't understand. She used to tell me. After she passed away, I kept everything exactly where she had left it. The property records, the insurance papers, the trust documents. Every file was locked inside the study cabinet. Only I knew the combination, or so I believed. William? Margaret's voice pulled me back. Are you still there? Yes. I couldn't finish the sentence. She spoke gently. I'm driving back there this afternoon. I'll see what's happening. Please don't confront anyone. I won't. I'll simply watch. After we ended the call, I sat motionless. The folded note from David Reynolds still rested on the table beside me. Do not sign anything. At first I thought it made no sense. now. It sounded like a warning. I took the paper from my pocket and read it again. 4 words. Nothing more. Why would David send such a message? He had been our family's lawyer for over 30 years. He wasn't the kind of man who acted dramatically. If he wrote something, there was always a reason. A nurse walked past and smiled. "Everything all right, Mr. Carter?" I forced a smile. "I hope so." That afternoon I tried calling Ethan. Again, voicemail. I left a message. "Hi, son. Margaret told me she saw moving trucks outside the house. I assume you're renovating something. Give me a call when you have time." My voice sounded calm, much calmer than I felt. An hour passed. No reply. I called Laura straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message this time. Instead, I sat in the small garden behind the nursing home. Residents chatted quietly around me. One elderly couple laughed while feeding birds. A volunteer played old jazz songs through a portable speaker. Life continued as though nothing had changed. But inside me, questions multiplied. Why hadn't my children answered? Why hadn't they told me about the moving trucks? Why had David warned me not to sign anything? Late that afternoon, my phone vibrated. It was Margaret. "I've just left your neighborhood. What did you see?" "They're emptying the house." I swallowed hard. "My furniture?" "Yes, the dining table, the piano, the books, my workshop. They've packed that too." I looked down at my hands. Those hands had built nearly every piece of furniture inside that house. The walnut dining table had taken me 3 weekends to finish. The rocking chair by the fireplace was Eleanor's favorite. She used to knit there every winter. Every item carried a memory. Now strangers were wrapping those memories in cardboard and tape. "Did you see Ethan?" "Yes." "And Laura?" "She was there." "What were they doing?" "They were talking with a man in a suit." "A buyer?" "I don't know, but he had a folder full of paperwork." My heartbeat quickened. Paperwork, a buyer, moving trucks, a sold sign. It was beginning to fit together, and I didn't like the picture it formed. Margaret lowered her voice. "William, there's something else." "What is it?" "I heard one of the workers ask where to place your photo albums. And Ethan said." She stopped. I could hear her breathing. "What did he say?" "He told them, throw away anything Dad won't need anymore." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because of the house, not because of the furniture, but because of those words. Anything Dad won't need anymore. As if my life had already been packed away. As if I were never coming home. Tears blurred my vision. I quickly wiped them away before anyone nearby noticed. I wasn't crying over possessions. I was mourning the thought that my own children had already begun erasing me. Just then, someone stepped into the garden. A member of staff approached me. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." "There's a gentleman at reception asking for you." "Who is it?" The staff member glanced at a business card, then looked back at me. "He says his name is David Reynolds. My children put me in a nursing home." 3 days later, I came home to find strangers packing my life into boxes. They thought I'd never come back. They were wrong. I spent 43 years building that house with my wife Eleanor. Every wall carried a memory. Every room held a piece of our lives together. The old oak tree in the front yard was planted the day our son, Ethan, was born. The porch swing was where Eleanor and I drank coffee every Sunday morning after church. Our daughter Laura learned to ride her bicycle on the cracked driveway. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was my family's history, or at least, I believed it still was. My name is William Carter. I'm 74 years old. Until one ordinary Tuesday morning, I truly believed my children loved me enough to protect me. Looking back now, I realized the warning signs had been there for months. I simply chose not to see them. It started after I slipped on the back steps while cleaning the gutters. The doctors called it a mild concussion. Nothing serious. 2 nights in hospital for observation. A few weeks of taking things easy. I expected to recover at home. Instead, Ethan arrived with Laura before I was discharged. They stood beside my hospital bed wearing the same strained smiles. "Dad," Ethan said gently. "We've been talking." Whenever he started a sentence that way, it usually meant he had already made a decision for someone else. Laura squeezed my hand. "We're worried about you." "I'm fine," I replied. "The doctor said I just need to rest." "We know," she answered quickly. "But what if you fall again? It's only temporary. You'll have nurses, good meals, people around you all day." Ethan nodded. "It's the safest place until you're stronger." I looked from one child to the other. They sounded so soft and so convincing, perhaps too convincing. "I'd rather recover at home," I said quietly. There was a brief silence. Then Ethan leaned forward. "Dad, please, do this for us. Not for you, for us." Those words should have stayed with me. Instead, they made me feel guilty. I didn't want my children worrying every night. I didn't want them arguing over who should check on me. If a few weeks in a rehabilitation center gave them peace of mind, maybe it wasn't such a terrible idea. So I agreed. The nursing home sat on the edge of town beside a small lake. The building itself wasn't unpleasant. The staff smiled kindly. The rooms were clean. Fresh flowers decorated the entrance. Everyone tried very hard to make it feel welcoming. Yet the moment Ethan carried in my overnight bag, I felt something I couldn't explain, not fear, not anger, something closer to being quietly forgotten. Laura unpacked my clothes into the small wardrobe. She avoided looking directly at me. Ethan kept checking his watch. "Well," he finally said, clapping his hands together, "we should let you settle in." "So soon?" I asked. "We've got meetings," he replied. Laura kissed my cheek. "We'll visit this weekend." This weekend? Today was Tuesday. She forced a smile. "You'll hardly notice the time." I watched them walk toward the door. Neither of them turned around. I told myself not to overthink it. Parents aren't supposed to make their children feel guilty. So I smiled. I waved. I wished them a safe drive home. Then I sat alone beside the window. From there I could see the parking lot. Ethan unlocked his car. Laura climbed into the passenger seat. They spoke for only a few seconds before driving away. No lingering, no second thoughts, no final wave. The car disappeared beyond the trees. The room suddenly felt much larger than before. That evening I tried calling Ethan straight to voicemail. I called Laura, no answer.
"They're probably busy,"
I whispered to myself. It was the explanation I wanted to believe. The next morning I wandered into the common lounge with a cup of coffee. An elderly gentleman named Frank invited me to play chess. "I'll take the black pieces," he joked. "They're luckier." We had barely started when one of the nurses approached. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes, someone phoned yesterday asking about you." "My son?" She shook her head. "A lawyer." I frowned. "A lawyer?" "Yes. He left this for you." She handed me a sealed cream-colored envelope. Across the front, written in neat blue ink, were just 3 words. "For William only." My hands suddenly felt cold. I recognized the handwriting immediately. David Reynolds, the lawyer who had handled my family's affairs for more than 30 years. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been typed. "Do not sign anything." Nothing else, no explanation, no greeting, no signature, just 4 words. I stared at the page, my heartbeat growing louder with every passing second. Before I could make sense of it, my phone began to ring. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected to see. Margaret Hayes, my late wife's closest friend. I answered before I could even say hello. She spoke in a trembling voice. "William, I think you need to hear something about your house."